For years, Keith Urban thought he understood the rules of fame. You smiled on cue, you answered carefully, you dodged the too personal questions with a joke and a shrug. You gave people enough of your heart to keep them listening, but not enough for them to see where it really hurt. And then one day, in a quiet studio with too bright lights and too much honesty, he broke his own rules. It wasn't supposed to be that kind of interview. It was framed as a reflective piece: life, love, and legacy at 58. A gentle conversation about music, sobriety, career longevity, fatherhood, the kind of thing he could do half asleep with a guitar in his lap and a practiced smile in place. He wasn't prepared to rip his marriage open in front of the world, but that's what happened. The cameras were still being adjusted when Keith sat down in the chair, one boot hooked around the other, fingers worrying the edge of his wedding ring. The interviewer asked him if he wanted water, coffee, tea. "Water's good," he said. His voice sounded normal. His heart did not. He knew they would talk about Nicole. They always did. Hollywood's golden couple, the quiet constant in her life, the cowboy poet who healed her broken heart. He had heard every version of that story. None of them were true, not the way people thought. He waited for the red light above the camera to blink on. When it did, he smiled instinctively, the way he'd done since he was a kid on small-town stages, before the world knew his name. The interviewer started softly. "Keith, people see you and Nicole as this rare thing, genuine, steady, loving. What do you think is the secret?" He almost gave the polished answer. Almost. Instead, he exhaled, long and slow, as if he'd been holding that breath for years. "I don't know if I'm the right person to ask about secrets," he said quietly. "I've spent a lot of my life hiding things." The interviewer's eyebrows lifted, just enough to betray surprise. The crew behind the cameras stilled. Keith could have walked it back, laughed, said he meant songs, not feelings, unreleased demos, not buried truths. But something in him refused to retreat. Maybe it was age. Maybe it was sobriety. Maybe it was the way Nicole had finally sat on that other side of the lens and peeled herself open for the world. Or maybe he was just tired. Tired of being the man with the guitar and the easy smile and the carefully edited confessions. So he kept going. "There's something I've never really said out loud about my marriage. Not like this, not publicly." The interviewer leaned forward. "And I think I owe it to her to finally say it. Or maybe I owe it to myself." He glanced down briefly at his hands, calloused, worn, ring glinting softly under studio light. "Everyone thinks I saved Nicole. But the truth is, there were years when I was terrified I was slowly losing her. And some days I wasn't sure whether I should keep holding on or step out of the way." The room went very, very quiet. He could feel their attention pressing in. For once, he didn't resent it. He decided to start from the beginning. When Keith Urban thinks of his life, he doesn't measure it in albums or awards or sold-out tours. He measures it in the nights he almost didn't make it, in the hotel rooms that smelled like stale smoke and spilled whiskey, in the crumpled lyric sheets he pretended were songs when they were actually apologies he would never send. By the time he met Nicole Kidman, the world had turned his story into something tidy: troubled musician, hard past, beautiful redemption arc. But the truth was messier. "When I first met her," he said into the camera, "I thought two things at the same time. One, she's completely out of my league. And two, if I'm not careful, I will ruin her life." The interviewer gave a soft, skeptical laugh. "You really thought that?" He nodded. "Absolutely. Look, it's not about the fame difference. People always think it's the fame, Like, how does it feel to be married to Nicole Kidman? He smiled faintly. I'll tell you how it feels, like you've been trusted with something you're not sure you're qualified to hold. He paused, searching for words. He continued, I knew my own shadows. Addiction, insecurity, this deep ache. I'd spent years trying to drown it, then years trying to outplay it on stage. When she came into my life, I kept thinking, what if all of that is still inside me? What if I drag it into her world? People, he said, liked the version of their love story where he was the steady one, the warm one, the guy with the guitar who sang about second chances and made the haunted movie star believe in love again. That's a nice story, he admitted. It's just not the whole one. The truth was uglier and softer and much more human. I wasn't just scared she'd leave me, he said. I was scared she'd stay and realize I wasn't enough. He remembered the first time he saw that fear turn into something heavier. It wasn't during a fight. They didn't throw plates or slam doors. It was an ordinary evening. Nicole had just wrapped one of those emotionally brutal roles, the kind where she spent months being someone else's pain. She came home late. He'd cooked dinner. The girls were already in bed. The house was quiet. He had imagined they would talk, decompress, laugh it off. Instead, she sat at the table, took one bite, put her fork down, and seemed to drift somewhere he couldn't follow. He asked if she was okay. She said, I'm just tired. But it wasn't tired. It was gone. Like the light behind her eyes had dimmed a little bit. Like she was somewhere else entirely. He didn't push. He'd learned a long time ago that some silences were landmines. So I did what I always do when I don't know what to say, he told the interviewer with a small, sad smile. I picked up a guitar. He played quietly as she tidied up in distracted motions, as if moving her hands could keep her from feeling whatever was crawling up her spine. He watched her from the corner of his eye, that mixture of love and helplessness, already familiar. I thought love meant fixing it, he said. You see someone you care about hurting. You want to jump in and take the pain away. But with her, it wasn't that simple. Half the time, I couldn't even tell where the pain came from. Old wounds, new pressure, the ghosts of roles she'd played, or just the weight of being Nicole Kidman in a world that always wanted a piece of her. He paused. And I had my own ghosts. You don't just get sober and wake up without them. He talked about the early years, of rehab, of relapses, of shame sitting in his chest like a stone. His addiction had become a public chapter. People knew that part. They clucked their tongues, admired his recovery, applauded his bravery. But there were things they didn't know. The late nights when he sat in his studio alone, sober but shaking, gripped by cravings that scared him with their intensity. The mornings he woke up next to Nicole and thought, in a flash of irrational panic, what if today is the day I mess it all up? The way he sometimes felt like a guest in his own happiness. People think once you've gotten clean, the story cuts to the credits and the uplifting song, he said. But real life keeps going. So does your brain. So do your fears. He looked up again, eyes steady. And the biggest fear of my life, he admitted, was that I would hurt the woman I loved most, not by what I did, but by what I couldn't give. The interviewer let a beat of silence stretch between them. Keith, she said softly, Nicole recently gave an interview where she talked about building walls around herself, about how long it took her to fully open her heart. Did you know that? Did you feel it? He laughed under his breath, not mocking, just tired. Oh, I felt it. I just didn't always know what I was feeling. He looked off to the side for a moment, as if remembering the shape of rooms, the quality of light, the particular way someone breathes when they're pretending they're fine. He said, "From the outside, our life looked beautiful, and in many ways it was. We had our girls, we had work we loved, we had a home that felt safe, but there were days I could feel her slipping just a fraction of an inch further away. Not physically. Physically, she was right there beside me. But emotionally?" He shook his head. "It was like watching someone walk down a hallway in slow motion, turning off the lights behind them one by one." He hesitated, then added, "And I wasn't blameless in that either. I had my own walls. Mine just looked friendlier." What did he mean? He explained. "See, my walls came with jokes, with music, with charm. I could talk for an hour without saying anything real. I could turn my own pain into a punchline before anyone had the chance to ask if I was okay." He sighed. "I thought I was being strong. I thought I was protecting her from the darker parts of me. But what I was really doing was teaching her how to do the same. We were both standing in front of each other with the lights on, but our hearts were still in the dark." The interviewer asked him about the night that fans had already heard about through Nicole's version, the night he got in the car and went looking for her while she drove aimlessly through Los Angeles, phone off, emotions in free fall. "What was that like for you?" she asked. Keith's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That night," he said quietly, "I thought I'd lost her." He remembers the feeling with painful clarity. He'd come home to an empty house and a silence that felt wrong. Not the gentle quiet of sleeping children and a wife still on set, a heavier silence, the kind that wrapped around his ribs and squeezed. Her car was gone. Her phone went straight to voicemail. "I tried not to panic," he said. "You tell yourself a million reasonable things. She's just driving. She needed some air. She lost track of time." But underneath all that, there's this voice that doesn't care about reason. It just says, "What if this is it? What if this is the night everything breaks?" He got in his car and started driving. No destination, just streets, headlights, and a gut feeling. "I know her," he said simply. "I know the places she goes when she needs to disappear without really disappearing." After an hour of searching, he saw it. Their car parked at an overlook above the city, the skyline spread out below like a cluster of distant, indifferent stars. She was sitting in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, not moving, he recalled. "I remember thinking, don't scare her. Don't make this about you. Just be there." He didn't knock on the window. He just opened the passenger door and slid in beside her. She didn't look at me at first. Her face was wet, eyes red. I could tell she'd been crying for a while. He had no speech prepared, no wise words, only a song. He had this unfinished track on my phone, something I'd been working on but couldn't quite finish. It didn't have a chorus yet, just a verse that kept looping back on itself. It was about being lost and not wanting directions, just wanting someone to sit beside you while you figure out which way hurt less. He pressed play. They sat in the dark, the quiet melody filling the car, city lights blinking far below like another universe where other versions of them were doing a better job at this whole being human thing. I didn't ask her what was wrong, not that night. Sometimes questions feel like demands. Explain your pain so I can fix it. She didn't need fixing. She needed somebody to not run away from the mess she was in. At some point, she broke. She cried, really cried. The kind of crying that doesn't care who's watching. "She grabbed my hand so hard it hurt," he said softly. And I remember thinking, If this is all I can do, just sit here and hold on, then I'll do it for as long as it takes. He didn't know then that she would later call that night the moment she realized he truly saw her. What he remembers is simpler. I realized I couldn't keep pretending I was the strong one and she was the fragile one, he said. We were two people just barely holding it together, choosing, in that car, not to fall apart alone. The interviewer shifted in her chair. Keith, there's a part of the story people don't know as much about. The night you broke down in the studio after an event, when you told Nicole you didn't know how to be the man she deserved. He winced faintly. Yeah, he murmured. That one. They had just come from a glittering Hollywood evening, one of those events where the cameras flash endlessly and compliments rain down like confetti. Nicole had been radiant, praised, photographed, interviewed. He'd stood beside her, smiling, proud. And yet, something about it. She knelt down, took the pages out of my hands like they were something poisonous, and she looked me right in the eye. He doesn't repeat everything, she said. Some words belong only to them. But he shares the line that rewrote something inside him. She said, "You're the only person I've ever felt completely safe with." He swallowed. He said, "You've got to understand," he said. "For someone like Nicole to say that, someone who's seen the best and worst of people, who's been in rooms with the most powerful people in the world, it did something to me. It made my fear look small, not gone, but small enough that I could imagine living with it without letting it drive the car." That night, something shifted. He stopped seeing himself as the man who had to keep proving he was worthy of her, and started seeing himself as the man she had already chosen, despite knowing exactly how broken he was. Even with that shift, things didn't suddenly become easy. There was a decade, Keith admitted, when their marriage almost came apart, not in flames, but in slow erosion. "Everyone always wants to know if there was some dramatic incident," he said. "Cheating, betrayal, some headline-ready scandal. There wasn't. That might have been easier, in a way. At least then you'd have something concrete to blame. Instead, it was subtler. She disappeared into her work. He disappeared into his. They loved each other fiercely. They were loyal, they were kind, but they were not always present. There was a stretch," he said, "when I'd walk into a room and feel like I was interrupting a conversation she was having with herself. And I know she felt the same about me. I was physically there, making breakfast, cracking jokes, writing songs, but emotionally, I was half in some future album no one had heard yet." He paused, the memory sitting heavy between them. He continued, "One night I told her, I don't know how to reach you anymore." It was not an accusation, it was a confession. He said, "It scared me how true it felt, like there was glass between us. I could see her, I could hear her, I just couldn't touch the part of her that mattered." The next morning, he packed a small suitcase. Not as some dramatic ultimatum, he clarified quickly. "I wasn't slamming doors. I wasn't saying, if you don't do this, I'm gone. I just honestly believed maybe what she needed was space. Maybe I was one more expectation she couldn't meet." He left her a note on the kitchen counter. "I love you enough to walk away if that's what helps you find yourself," he wrote. He got in the car and drove to a small, hidden studio outside the city, the place he always went when he needed to sort the noise in his head into something that sounded like music. He sat there with his guitar, playing the same 3 chords over and over, thinking, if this is the end, I need to find a way to write my way through it. Hours passed. He didn't expect her to come. When the door opened, I thought it was an engineer or an assistant, he said, but it was her. She walked in without makeup, without the armor of public composure. Just Nicole, the woman, not the icon. She sat down beside me, he remembered, took my hand and said, "I don't want space. I want help. I don't want distance. I want you." Her voice had trembled. His did too. That was one of the hardest and most honest conversations we've ever had. We didn't sound like a Hollywood couple. We sounded like two people who were both so scared of being abandoned that we'd accidentally started abandoning each other first. That night, he put the suitcase back in the closet. She went back to therapy, so did he. We didn't fix everything overnight, he said. We just stopped pretending nothing was broken. The interviewer's voice softened. "Keith, when Nicole told her side of the story, she said something that broke a lot of people. That she wasn't always a good partner. That you loved her more than she knew how to love you, until now." He closed his eyes briefly. "Yeah," he murmured. "I heard that." "How did it feel?" she asked. He opened his eyes again. They were bright, but not from the studio lights. "It hurt," he said simply. "Not because she was wrong, because she was finally telling the truth, and I knew how hard that was for her." He let the memory surface. The morning of her 58th birthday. He thinks that day was her awakening. From my side, it felt like something I'd been waiting on for 17 years. He woke up before her. Habit. Touring schedule embedded in his bones. The house was quiet. The girls were older now, their rooms neat in a way that signaled more absence than order. He went downstairs, made coffee, and started writing. He said it wasn't supposed to be a letter. It was just thoughts. Gratitude, fear, love, all tangled up. But the more he wrote, the more it turned into something I realized she might need one day. Maybe not that day, maybe not that year, but someday. He wrote about her laugh, about the way she still turned into a total maniac during thunderstorms, counting the seconds between lightning and thunder as if she could negotiate with the weather. He wrote about her courage, not the kind the world applauded, the red carpet bravery of showing up and being perfect. The quieter kind, the mornings she got out of bed when her heart felt like stone, the nights she walked into his arms even when every instinct told her to retreat. And he wrote one line that had been living in his chest for years. "You don't have to be perfect to be loved. You just have to let yourself be seen." He folded the letter and, without entirely knowing why, tucked it into the book on her nightstand. A book he knew she'd been just about to finish for 6 months. He thought, one day she'll find this when she needs it. I didn't know it would take 2 years. When she finally did find it, he wasn't there. Later that day, he said, she came into the kitchen with the letter in her hand and tears on her face. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I knew. He smiled faintly. She sat beside me, put her head on my shoulder, and whispered, "I think I'm ready to be fully here now." He had no idea what to do with the relief that flooded him. "So I made a joke," he said dryly. "That's good timing, babe. I was just about to give up." The interviewer laughed. He shook his head. "I didn't mean it," he said. "I was never going to give up. But I'd be lying if I said there weren't nights I wondered if the love I felt was too much for her, too intense, too persistent, like I was asking her to breathe underwater." He looked directly into the camera. "The confession I never made is that there were moments I started to believe her walls were a verdict, that maybe I was asking for a level of intimacy she just wasn't able to give. And I had to decide whether I could love her as she was, not as I hoped she'd become." He took a breath. "I chose to stay," he said simply. every day, even on the days it felt like she was a million miles away while standing right in front of me. When she finally turned toward him with her whole heart, it didn't feel like a miracle. It felt like the natural conclusion to every small, stubborn act of love that came before. People talk about turning points like they're sudden, like a scene in a movie. But most of the time, the turning point is just the moment you realize you've been slowly turning for years. The interviewer leaned in. So, if Nicole's confession was that she didn't fully open her heart until 58, she said, "What's yours?" Keith let out a long breath. "My confession," he said slowly, "is that for a long time, I didn't trust that I was allowed to be loved the way she loves me now." He let that sit there, knowing how strange it sounded. He grew up thinking love was conditional. You're loved if you perform, if you're easy, if you don't cause trouble, if you don't have needs that inconvenience anyone. Sobriety had taught him a lot. Therapy had taught him more, but some beliefs were stubborn. There were years, he said, when even as I was loving her with everything I had, some part of me still believed I had to earn every good day, every soft moment, every time she reached for my hand first. He glanced down at his ring again. I thought, if I mess up, if I'm too much, if my darkness comes back, this goes away. He looked back up, gaze steady. That kind of thinking doesn't make you a better partner. It makes you careful, too careful. You stop bringing your whole self into the room. You keep your doubts, your needs, your uglier feelings to yourself. You tell yourself you're protecting the relationship, but really, you're just editing yourself out of it. He paused. I had to learn that love isn't a contract you negotiate, he said. It's not, I'll only take up this much space, I'll only have this much pain, I'll only need this much from you. It's two people saying, here's all of me, the parts I like and the parts I don't. Can we hold this together without dropping it? The interviewer swallowed. And can you? She asked. Now? He smiled. Now? Yeah, he said quietly. Not perfectly. We still mess up, we still hurt each other sometimes, but the difference is we don't hide anymore, not the way we used to. He thought of the way Nicole had looked into the camera during her own interview, eyes clear, voice steady, saying words he never thought he'd hear her say in public. I wasn't always a good partner. Keith loved me more than I knew how to love him, until now. He'd watched that interview alone the first time, not because he didn't want to watch it with her, but because he needed a moment to process the reality that decades of private struggle were now being offered to the world. I cried, he admitted simply, not because she said I loved her more, but because she finally believed she could catch up. He shifted in his chair, the leather creaking softly. People keep asking me how it feels to know she didn't fully open her heart until 58, he said, but that's not the headline for me. The headline is that she did open it, that she decided time wasn't a reason to stop trying. He looked straight into the camera as if speaking not to the interviewer, not even to the future audience, but to the version of himself who once sat on a studio floor, surrounded by torn lyrics, convinced he would never be enough. If you're lucky, he said slowly, you get one person in your life who stays while you learn how to love them, who doesn't punish you for the time it takes, who doesn't weaponize your fear. Nicole was that person for me, as much as I was for her. He let the next words come out unpolished, exactly as he felt them. Keith saved me, she'd said. Here's my truth, he said now. She saved me too, just in ways the world will never see. The interviewer asked him one last question, she whispered. Why talk about this now? Why tell the world all of this at 58? He gave a small, rueful smile. Because I spent half my life hurting myself, he said, and the other half pretending I wasn't. He thought of the kid who picked up a guitar to drown his pain, the young man who thought substances were a personality trait, the rising star who treated his own heart like collateral damage. I used to think honesty was admitting the things I'd done wrong, the drinking, the rehab, the bad decisions. That's part of it, sure, but the harder honesty is admitting the ways you didn't show up, the ways you didn't let yourself be loved. The nights you sat in the next room over from someone who would have held you if you just asked. And you didn't. He shrugged lightly. At 58, I don't want to write around that anymore, he said. I want to write through it. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. If there's someone out there watching this, he added, who thinks they've wasted too much time or hurt someone too much or missed their chance to learn how to love better, I want them to know they're wrong. He let the words fall one by one, careful and sincere. It's not too late to walk back into the room. It's not too late to knock on the door you closed yourself. It's not too late to say, I didn't know how before. I'm trying now. He sat back, exhaled, and gave a small, almost disbelieving laugh. Nicole says her confession is that she built walls, and I spent 17 years gently knocking them down, he said. Mine is simpler. There were days I was terrified she'd never open the door, and I chose to wait anyway. He paused, and I'd do it again. The interview ended the way most do. The red light went off, the crew started to breathe again, microphones were unclipped, cables coiled, cameras powered down. But the real ending came later. When the interview aired, the internet did what it always does. It clipped the most emotional moments, argued about them, turned them into quotes and discourse and think pieces. They called it Keith Urban's Quiet Confession. Love, addiction, and radical patience. Inside the marriage, everyone thought they understood. But the moment that spread farther than the rest was not the dramatic revelation, not the suitcase, not the night in the car. It was a single line, delivered softly, almost as an afterthought. Keith loved me long before I learned how to love myself, Nicole had said. In his interview, he answered her, without naming her but leaving no doubt. He's wrong about one thing, he said. I didn't wait alone. Even when she didn't believe in herself, she never stopped choosing us. Even behind those walls, there was a woman who showed up every day, who fought her own battles and still made space for mine. He let a hint of a smile touch his lips. If anything, he added, we learned how to love ourselves by learning how to love each other. Messily, slowly, imperfectly, but truthfully. Before the credits rolled, the interviewer asked him if Nicole had seen the interview yet. He nodded. Yeah, he said quietly. We watched it together. And what did she say? The interviewer asked. He laughed, the sound warm and a little shaken. He said, she took my hand and said, I'm sorry you waited so long. He swallowed, and I told her I'd wait all over again. He hesitated, then added one more sentence, a sentence that by the next morning was everywhere. Thank you for finally coming home with your whole heart. I love you. The world took it as a message to her, but in the privacy of their living room, when the screens were dark and the house was quiet, Nicole leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, You came home too, you know? And for the first time in a very long time, Keith Urban believed it. Not as a lyric, not as a performance, not as a story he told the world, but as the simple, unadorned truth of a man who had finally learned how to let himself be be loved.